Hey guys, Metasploit here, back again with another video, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to set up port forwarding for Metasploit or for performing exploits over the internet. Now what do I mean by this? Well, firstly, a lot of you guys requested for this video. Now when I say this, I really mean that. Like, this is probably one of the most requested videos, and the reason being is I've shown you all of these videos where I show you how to run exploits on different computers, or perform or test different computers for vulnerabilities and how to exploit them, how to generate payloads, but they were all on my local area network. Now most of you want to apply this in real life. Now of course, I don't know in what context you're trying to do this, but I would really just pass on a kind disclaimer to you that this video is strictly for educational purposes. So the premise of this video is to show you how to set up port forwarding so that you can use Metasploit, to generate, or MSF Venom, to generate payloads that you can send to your target over the internet, and you can get a Meterpreter session back to your computer. So the whole idea, or the key point here, is that the exploits will work over the internet, right? So that's the most important thing here. Now, of course, I've taken a long time to make this video, and many people have pointed this out. They're like, why can't you just make it if you know how to do it? And the reason being is there are tons of routers out there, and there's tons of network configurations. I might not know what your network configuration is and how everything works. So that's where the confusion steps in, and then many people will say my video is irrelevant or doesn't work. So I decided to make it now and explain it, to the best of my ability with the setup that I have. Now, given the setup that I have is quite simple, but also quite complex in the sense of networking, again, I'm going to try and explain it to the best of my ability. So let's start off with a simple type of scenario. So you are the attacker and you have your computer right here. I'm running Windows, and my attacker computer or my attacker virtual machine is Kali Linux. Alright, so this is going to be where I launch my attack from, where I generate my payload, and where I'm going to listen for a connection. Now, I'm not going to be covering in this video how you're going to get the payload to your target. That's, very, very different, and that will incorporate a lot of social engineering, or however you get your however you get your payload or your malicious application to your target is up to you. It can be whatever method. Now, I'm going to try and solve the whole issue of bridging you to your target, alright, across the internet. Remember, over LAN it's very simple because IPs are local IPs, alright, and you're not dealing with ports and port forwarding through routers. But the whole connection process is quite simple. It's just that people really just get confused over the inclusion of ports. Okay, so I'm just going to start off with a simple scenario here. So you have your attacker computer, and this is running on my local network, and I've configured it to run as a bridged computer, which means it has its very own local IP. Now, I'm just going to type in ifconfig here, and as you can see, the local IP is 192.168.1.112. Alright, now that's the local IP, and if you're having issues with this, I would recommend, if you're using a virtual machine, if you keep on having issues with your local IP and the fact that in a bridged connection it does not show up with a valid local IP, then I would recommend that you change from a bridged connection to a NAT connection, where it shares the connection with the host. Alright, so it uses the host's IP address. In that case, and in both cases, you would need to turn off your firewall if you're running Windows. Now, if you have Kali Linux or any other penetration distribution installed physically on a computer, you don't need to disable any firewall. That's unless you have one running already. Alright, that was a mouthful. So, you are trying to connect to a target. So the connection flow is as follows. So you connect to your router. Alright, so your router also has a local IP, or it's called the gateway. And then that connects to the internet, and then furthermore, through a certain port, the connection goes outgoing through a certain port. And then remember, this connection is not going is not outgoing, because we will be sending commands, but the connection rather will be incoming. So that's why we need to set up port forwarding. I'll show you how to generate a simple payload, an Android payload for example, and I'll show you how to set the L host and all of that. But for now, just let's get the flow right. So the attacker runs the payload on their computer. Their connection or the payload is encoded with our public IP, alright, and the public IP goes back to our router through the port that we set. And then we set up port forwarding on the router so that that connection is forwarded back to our operating system, this operating system. We will set up the listener, the listener being the local IP with the port that we had set. Now that may seem a bit confusing, but I'm going to hopefully explain it to you really simply. So what do you need here? The first thing you need is your local IP, which is got, it's really very simple. The next thing that you will need is your public IP, which can be found on different websites or on your router. But I'll show you that. And of course, I'll be blurring mine in case any of you get any funny ideas, if you know what I'm saying. And finally, you need your router's local IP or your gateway, and then your port, the port that you'll be listening on and the port that you'll be using for connection. Now this can be as promiscuous as you want, because you have to take into consideration that your target might be running a firewall, and any outgoing connections through any weird, weirdly configured ports might be blocked. So I would recommend that you also check that out. Now by default, if you're running Windows, I would recommend that you disable Windows Firewall for the time in which you're performing the attack or the time in which you're trying to connect to your target. Alright, so moving on to the next stage, which is getting your router's IP address or your gateway IP address. You can run the ifconfig, which in most cases should display it, but if it doesn't, then you can run the route n, which is considered to be good practice, and it will show you the route of your of the packets. So you have your gateway here, and there it is, 192.168.1.1. Now, as I said, I'm running quite a complicated or complex in a technical sense. I'm running a very complex network. What do I mean by this? What I mean is I'm running 3 subnets on my network. Alright, so let me explain to you the internet structure in my house. So I have my first router, which is where my ISP internet connection comes into. I use that for all my wireless, my Wi-Fi and stuff like that. Alright, and then I have a LAN cable coming out of that going into my office, which comes into the router that I'm using. So my first subnet. Alright, now that's the network that I'm currently connected on. So you can see that I'm connected to the 192.168.1.1 subnet. My first router, which is my primary router, that's where the main internet connection comes into. That's where all, the local IP address traffic comes through. That's 192.168.0.1. That is that router's IP. So I have to configure them both so that the first one sends the connection to this router, and then I finally get I can finally get the connection coming to this router and to the device in which I've set the local IP, which in this case is 192.168.1.112. Now, of course, you might have a simpler connection. You might have one router which could be 192.168.0.1 or whatever IP range that manufacturer uses. Now, this is where I was coming to. I cannot understand, or I cannot configure all of the routers. I have what I'm running, and setting up port forwarding on different routers is different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and link all the manuals or all PDFs to all router manufacturers on the website, so you can check that out for yourself. So if you have trouble setting up port forwarding, then you can also check that out, and it should be able to help you. Now, I'm running, as you can see right here, I'm running TP-Link routers, which means that I'm going to show you, if you are running TP-Link, then you're lucky. I'm running 2 versions. I have my older version, which is the main one right here, this green one, and my newer one, which is in my office. And you can see it's one of the newer model of TP-Links. It really doesn't matter. The process is just the same. So we need to set up port forwarding. Now, what you would do if you had one router, if you are on TP-Link, is you'd go into forwarding and virtual servers. Alright, so you log into your router. Now, if you do not know your router's configuration page your router's configuration page credentials, then you might need to get them. But if your ISP has locked them, then you can't perform port forwarding. So to access your router, just type in your router's IP here, or the gateway address which we got from here. Alright, so I have typed that in as well on my next one, and then you enter the credentials. Usually, if you haven't configured any passwords on them, the username and the password should be underneath the router. It's usually the normal basic ones like username and password, etc., etc. Alright, that was a mouthful. So I'm on my first router. This is where the internet connection comes through. Now, for most cases, this is good enough for you. Alright, this is what you need to do. If you have one router, this is your main router. This is where everything is coming through and being spread out. This is what you need to do. So I need to go into virtual servers and I'm going to hit add new. Alright, now of course I'm going to log in here. I'm using default credentials here, so I'm just going to log in. I don't want to save, and I'm going to go into forwarding. I should have blocked my IP or blurred it down there. So virtual servers, and I'm going to hit add new. All right. Now in here, you specify the service port. All right. And the internal port. Now I would recommend for both. In my cases, I'm going to specify the port 444 right there. And the internal port is going to be 444. Now, the service port means this is the port in which the connection will be coming through. And then this is the port that is going to be dispersed internally. Okay. Now, in my case, as I said, I'm running a second router, which is what I'm connected to right now. This is my first router. So in here, if it was in your case, you would enter your Kali Linux local IP, which is right here. Sorry, it's right here. You'd enter 192.168.0.112, not 1. Okay. In my case, I'm running a subnet, so I have to specify the IP allocated to my secondary router, which I can find right here, and I know what it is. You can find it on the status page. It should show you the IP, and that is 192.168.0.100. All right, that is the IP given to my second router. Now, in your case, if you have one router, you don't need to do this. You just need to set your local IP in which you're going to be listening, which in this case is going to be your Kali Linux IP. And then the protocol, I usually like keeping it as all, but if you want to specify a protocol to keep things as promiscuous, as non-promiscuous as possible, then you might want to select TCP if you're going to be using reverse TCP, for example. But I like keeping it as all, and I'm going to hit the status as enabled. And if it's a common service port, you can specify that here as a type of connection, in which, again, this is all to help with staying untraceable or the connections not being detected. So you can use that if you want to. So I've set up this port forwarding. Now, what does this mean? Is if I generate a payload with the IP address of my router, which is my local, my public IP, the target is going to run it, it's going to execute it, and then it's going to connect to my router. All right, it's going to connect to my router through the port 444. All right, and my router now, my router's job now is to send this connection to my secondary router, which is right here. All right, and that's what I'm doing right now. It's going to send it to this local IP with the same port. So I'm going to hit save, and I'm done with this router. In your case, just specify the Kali Linux IP here, and you're good. It will send the connection there. Now, for you, that's done. If you have more than one router, you need to repeat the process, but a bit differently. So again, I'll go into forwarding virtual server, and I'm going to add a new one. So again, I have to log in. There we are. Hopefully that works. Yeah, there we are. And as you can see, here's the IP. See, that's what I told you. It's dynamically allocated, but I've not restarted my router. So it's 192.168.0.100. So the connection from the target will be sent to my router, my first router. Then my first router is going to send it to this router. Now I need to set up the port forwarding. So I'll go into forwarding again, add new. Service port 444 again, IP address. Now here I'll enter the IP of Kali Linux, which is 192.168.1.112, and the internal port, which is 444. The protocol will be all status enabled, common service port if you want to specify that, and you can hit save, and you should be good. Port forwarding should be ready. Now, many of you will say, well, how do I set up my listener now, or how do I generate a payload? Well, we've looked at generating payloads, but maybe I can just demonstrate how to do it. So now you need your public IP address, or the IP address given to your router by your ISP. Okay, and let's do this right now. So I'm going to go back into Kali Linux, and you can always get this IP address. I'm not going to display mine, obviously for security reasons, but I'm just going to give you a simple example. So let me just open up my web page. You can go into canyouseeme.org, and mine is right here, and you can always check the ports once you've configured them to see if they're running and open once the listener is set, and the connection has to be running from the target. So I must have blurred this, but I'm not going to use this. I'm just going to use a random one when I'm showing you how to generate a payload. So let me open up my terminal. Let me expand this so you can see what the hell is going on here. And my virtual machine seems to be, really lagging out. So let's say I'm generating an Android payload who's, is supposed to connect back to us. So MSF Venom. Now, of course, I can't demonstrate this because I don't have anyone to test this on, rightfully so. MSF Venom payload, and we can select Android, Meterpreter, and reverse TCP. Remember, you can specify any type of Meterpreter session. Now, here is where you set the L host. In here, you would set your public IP, the IP given to your router. Alright, so if you type in what's my IP, that's the IP you should put in here, because all the connections will go to this IP, which is your primary router. Your router is then going to forward it to this computer. This computer is then going to be listening on its own local IP for any connections coming through the port that you specified. And then it's going to get the reverse Meterpreter. Alright, so the L host can be something like, I don't know, like 194.52 or, just a weird IP. I'm just giving a random one. Hopefully this doesn't belong to anyone real. Maybe you guys try it and you find out that it belongs to someone. So that's your public IP, and then the port remains the same. L port is 444. And of course you can encode your payload as much as you want, but I'm giving you an example of how one would go about generating this. So root, and again desktop, and we can finally hit we can finally generate like an what's the name of the application? Let's see, test app.apk. I'm gonna hit enter, and now of course I'm not going to be testing this, but I can guarantee it will work, especially for connections coming back to your computer, and this also will work for setting up or for using like remote access tools, and hopefully I'll demonstrate this in the future. Alright, so I've generated the app, and what you do now is, however you deliver this to your target, is you would run it on their device, and now you need to set up the listener. So we let's start up MSF console here. Standard stuff. We set up our multi-handler, and we set the payload again, and we should be good to proceed. So I'm going to start up the MSF console here, and let this start up. Hopefully it doesn't delay. Yeah, there we are. So we say use the multi-handler, and we hit enter, and hopefully this works. And now we set the payload to the one that we specified, which is Android Meterpreter reverse TCP. I'm going to hit enter, and now if we show the options, the only thing we need to change is the L host and the L port. L host is this IP address, the IP address of the Kali machine, because we don't need to listen on our public IP. That would be kind of stupid, So set L host to our IP 192.168.1.112. I'm going to hit enter. Set L port to 444, the one we had set. I'm going to hit enter, and once you have once the target has run the application, all you have to do is hit run, and you wait for a connection back, and you should be good. So that was a lot of information. Now, of course, I've said I've tried to make this as comprehensive as possible, and this is by far not the last video in port forwarding, because it is quite different, and there are many services that you can use. I'll be talking about NGRock, and also how to use the dynamic IP for port forwarding, especially with remote access tools. So hopefully that's something I'll look at in the future. But for now, for those of you who have been asking for this video for a long time, there you are. I'll be hopefully posting all the resources or all manuals to all the router manufacturers on my website, so you can check that out on my website. It should be the latest post. If you don't see, don't worry, I'll be working on posting it, because hopefully I can have my website as a secondary source of information where you can find even more resources in relation to the videos that I upload. So that's going to be it for this video, guys. If you enjoyed this video, you found value in it, please leave a like down below. If you have any questions or suggestions, let me know in the comment section, on my social networks, on my website. If you want to support the channel, you can do so on Patreon. Any help is appreciated, but if you don't really need to if you don't want to. That being said, that's going to be it for this video, guys, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. Peace.